This message is for all the guys out there. Guys, if you are struggling with ED, not getting the job done, Hims is here to help. Hims has a lot of personalized options when it comes to treating ED that are compounded with doctor-trusted ingredients. For hims.com/care, you can access a licensed medical provider and trusted treatments for ED 100% online. And if prescribed, Hims will ship to you for free in discreet packaging. It's that simple. So if you're having a difficult time getting ready for those, how we say, other kinds of adventures, look no further for a doctor-trusted solution. Go to forhims.com/care. No copay, no awkward in-person appointments, no video visits, and no insurance required. So again, go to forhims.com/care, CARE, to get started. That's forhims.com/care. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host Mason, and today is a throwback episode. We're talking to Tristan Gooley, and Tristan, what's really cool about this episode is Tristan's just super unique skill of using nature to navigate. So that's obviously the title of this episode, but that's what he does. He realized as he led adventures and did adventures, he didn't really like talking about gear and all the stuff that goes along with a lot of trips. And I know we don't talk about that a lot on the show. And he realized he loved to read nature, look at what's going on, with the clouds and the sun and the trees and the stars and the grass, and just start picking up on the clues that nature tells us on which way is which. And he's going to share a little bit of that. It's obviously like a lifelong pursuit for him, so there's so much more to know than just this conversation. But Tristan's been on a couple other podcasts too. And this episode, by the way, is from 2019. He's going to tell you everything from how to locate north using puddles, finding your proximity to civilization using plants, and using even the behavior of animals to forecast weather and direction. And he has so much more to learn. He has books out. I really encourage you to check out naturalnavigator.com. He has a Twitter. And the book that we went over is called The Nature Instinct. I have that on my shelf, and I have read a lot of it, and it is incredibly insightful. And it's good information to know because on any adventure, as we know, things might not always go to plan. And it is very helpful and probably wise to have just some survival techniques and some rudimentary navigational and orienteering skills to know where you need to go and how to get back to safety. So this was a really cool conversation. It really stuck out to me. It's one of the ones we've done in the past, so I realized we've never done it as a replay. So here it is. Welcome, everyone, to the show. Today we have avid outdoorsman, New York Times bestseller. He's a TED talker, an adventurer, and a nature navigator, Tristan Gooley. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mason. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I always ask this, and I legitimately don't know. Where are you coming from today?
I'm very near home. I work in a cabin in a part of England, southern England, called West Sussex. So we're only a couple of hours from London, but it suits me because it's about as wild as you can get and be a couple of hours from London.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm sure it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's English countryside at its best around here.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of that part of the UK, and we have New England here in the States, and they're kind of similar. They're very, very. It's quaint. It's lovely. It's gorgeous. It's comforting countryside.
Yeah, I don't know New England well, but it's world famous for the fall, obviously. But I think one of the nice things there is you do the seasons just generally a bit more seriously than us. We sort of get a sort of there's a mildness to everything here. We get
Right.
snow and we get a bit of heat in the summer, but it's all very English and well behaved generally.
That's funny, man. So yeah, you have a really interesting expertise, and I might ask a lot of the same questions that you answer on a frequent basis. I'll try not to, but it's just so uh, out of the box for uh, anyone else really I know. And I've watched some videos and read some of your books, and it's an awesome skill and it's an art. You navigate by nature. Could you explain exactly what that is to someone that doesn't know, and then how you got into it?
Yeah, natural navigation is it's very simple on one level. It's getting from A to B and understanding where you are without using any tools. No maps, no compass, no GPS, no smartphone. Um, so that part of it's very simple, but then it starts as a really practical basic skill. You find north using the North Star, or the sun is due south in the middle of the day. And then you quickly realize that absolutely everything in nature is trying to make a map and a compass for you. It's just having a little bit of patience and learning to really use the senses. And literally everything outdoors is a map or a compass. I mean, I say this, I was quite sort of scared to say it in the early days because I thought, I'll end up looking a fool. But now I have fun saying it. So I'll say it to you. You can think of anything you want outdoors, literally anything, and I'll try and make a map or a compass out of it.
Wow, that's incredible. So anything.
Yeah, absolutely anything.
What's one of the hardest things that it's to make a map out of in nature?
Well, it's the if I start at the other end, the easiest things that are very very fussy. So plants or animals that have a really distinct habitat. Whenever you see them, they are whispering, "You are in this niche," if you like. So stinging nettles is one of my favorite first ones to tell people about because it's the opposite of what people think. People think stinging nettles grow everywhere, but they appear to grow everywhere because they grow where we are. Human beings change the soil, the way we live, work, farm, etc. changes the soil. So you see a stinging nettle, and in the modern mind would be, well, that's just a slightly irritating weed. But to a natural navigator, it's a clue. It's a clue you're close to civilization. So that's the easy end. At the harder end, at plants, animals, anything in nature that can crop up in a lot of different situations, because then it's still whispering to you, but it's being a bit vague. It's saying, well, you might be here or you might be there. So then you have to add other clues, and it becomes much more of a jigsaw at that point.
Because nature has so many, so much going on. A forest is not just the trees; it's the soil, it's the animals, it's the rocks, the moss, everything. So all that together gives you a very good idea of what direction you're heading.
Yeah, it's the map or the compass. So when people are totally new to the subject, the fast way in is actually direction. So the thing I encourage people to do is ask themselves the question, which way am I looking, and then just let your surroundings answer that. If it's a sunny day and you've got any practice using the sun, you can answer it in half a second and pretty accurately. But on a cloudy day in the middle of woodland, it takes a little bit of practice to nail it there. But it is possible. Not always to within 1 degree, but you can get a good sense of direction in any outdoors environment using some sort of related, quite standard techniques. The sun and the wind play a huge part in this, but I think of the sun and the wind leaving footprints, and it's almost sun and wind tracking. So noticing that there are more flowers on one side of a bank or a rock or anything like that, it's the sort of thing that the vast majority of people would ignore or not take anything from. But to a natural navigator, it's starting to not just whisper but scream direction.
So how did you start noticing this stuff? How did you get into it?
Well, I didn't sort of really come across natural navigation until some point in my 20s. I'm not sure exactly. It crept up on me a little bit, but I was a restless kid, and I got really into journeys, and I made a decision to pursue navigation once I realized that the thing I'd enjoyed a little bit of flying small planes, a lot of trekking, mountain treks and sailing small boats. And I was trying to think, well, what is it that's drawing me to do? And it's actually the shaping of journeys that really excited me. So a lot of people get excited by kit, and I think a lot of people who listen to your podcast, maybe kit people. And it's like different. It's tribes within tribes. So there are tribes within the sailing world. People on sailing boats are different to people on power boats. They're not better or worse, and it's the same in all outdoor environments. So I quite often I can notice kit people. You can see them. They're the people who park their car or their pickup or something, and then they just get really excited, pulling out all the bits, and they take everything out of the rucksack and then put everything back in it and stuff like that. And they'll do that for 2 hours.
Oh yeah, I know. That is not me either.
No.
But we have a lot of listeners that are, so I often forget to ask those types of questions because I forget not everyone's like me.
Yeah, and I'm obviously not a kit person, so I would find when I was walking, flying, sailing on these little journeys that people getting really animated, talking, spending an hour talking about the best type of rope to do a certain thing on a boat. And I was like thinking, actually, the boat itself, I don't find that interesting. And I was trying to work out what is it that's interesting to me. And this sounds a little bit kind of weird and zen, but I sometimes say my ideal sailing wouldn't involve a boat. Because it's the understanding what the elements are doing and shaping a journey through that understanding that really excites me. And hiking, walking, we can do that. That is, we might want to put some boots on, but there's not, it's not that kit focus. And so it's sort of minimalist in terms of the kit you need, but sort of maximalist in terms of understanding what's going on around you. Because if you've got the latest best kit, you can get away without much knowledge because you can stare at a smartphone and get yourself, from A to B, with hundreds of dollars worth of kit in each hand. But with natural navigation, you have to come in a completely different way. You have nothing in your hands, quite often not a huge amount in the pack, and your chances of making B might be determined by noticing a breeze on your left cheek.
Man, I love this. Because I definitely fall into that category when it comes to a journey. That is so funny, man. I honestly don't meet a whole lot of people that aren't kit focused. So this is exciting. So you realize that what really fired you up or got you excited about your journeys was the navigation, and basically creating an adventure, trying to get from point A to point B. Did you start basically trying to do that naturally to get somewhere as the journey rather than using everything you had at your power to get there? You would just say, I'm going to try to get here only based on natural direction. Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. Finally, for the vast majority of us, we're able to access the mountains again. Snow has melted. Not everywhere, I know. There's plenty of snow still in the Sierras and in places like that. But as you take the full advantage of this opportunity called summer, make sure you have the best gear possible. That's lightweight, that's made by fellow adventurers and backpackers. That is Outdoor Vitals. I'm a huge fan of Outdoor Vitals. I have about half a dozen pieces of their gear. Absolutely high quality, incredibly well made, and I know that it's not going to fail me out there. That I know that won't be something that keeps me from having a really good time and making the most of this time of year. So make sure you have the gear from a brand where it's not going to get stuck, broken, or just doesn't work. So if you want to be confident in the gear you're taking out there, I'm proud to support the folks over at Outdoor Vitals. From backpacking and camping to trekking and everything else, if you want to take your summer adventures to the next level with ultralight and high-quality performance, go to outdoorvitals.com and let them know Mason from Adventure Sports Podcast sent you. Again, that's outdoorvitals.com. Right now is the time for adventure, so let's go. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
No, I went a sort of I was a conventional navigator. I taught myself where I could, which was the walking part. I'm largely self-taught. A little bit of help here and there along the way. But flying and sailing, I did all the formal qualifications, to a reasonably high standard, sort of ocean yacht master, we call it in the UK. I don't know if it's the same in the States there, but and multi-engine instrument rated pilot, et cetera, et cetera. But I was only doing that because I sort of legally had to do that. If there was a way of doing it without spending, money on exams and training and stuff, then I'd probably have tried to do it. But
Right.
I would have endangered everyone in the process. But so then I pushed the journeys, and the scale got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was taking on some quite sort of challenging things. But there was a kind of philosophical earthquake, is the only way I can describe it at the moment, where I realized that the journeys were getting bigger. They were really quite sort of adventurous things, and yet they weren't getting any more exciting. And in a weird way, they were becoming less fun because the danger had gone up, so that gives you a bit of adrenaline. But then the amount of planning, I mean, I at one point I put a stack of all the paperwork I'd needed to do certain expeditions, and it was getting sort of waist high, and that's just not me at all. And so I came across this idea, and I don't remember exactly how it all started, but it was this idea that you can find your way without using all this kit that I'd spent years and dedicated myself to learning how to use. And I just tried it, and there was just no turning back. I mean, if you just try to cover even 1 mile outdoors, it's if you've got a map and you find a car park or something like that, and there's another car park 1 mile away, and you're not just going to follow the road, you're going to go cross country for 1 mile. I can't say to people go and do that because we have to be careful in this age. But if that's what I did. I just crossed a little bit of English countryside, just using the trees, the sun and flowers and things like that. And it was like a bomb going off in my head. I was like, oh my God, this is the most exciting thing I've done since I was a child. It really was like sort of Christmas Eve as a child. It was great fun.
That reminds me, there's nothing like your first adventure, your first journey. And I feel like we spend a lot of our lives, I mean, personally, I don't know if you fall in this category, trying to kind of recapture that amazement of that first trip, because everything was new. You didn't know how to use anything. It was all just a new world. And you're just a lot more prepared in the future. And even when you push the boundaries, it's still hard to recapture that first bit of magic. And so this has done that for you. Do you remember what you first noticed that said, I can find my way using that? Was it one example, or was it all started growing up together? Was it like a tree or a puddle or something like that?
Well, I still get a little bit of that type of joy every day when I notice a new thing. I mean, it was only yesterday, I think it was. I put it on Instagram. I just noticed something. All the clues are part of the same family, so they're quite often related to other ones. So, you and your listeners will have come across the idea that moss grows on the north side of trees, and that, funnily enough, it's there's some truth in it, but I've had to write a blog about it because it's one of the most complex techniques to use. Weirdly, it's the best known and one of the least reliable unless you're very skilled. But I was walking through the woods near home yesterday or the day before, and I noticed that the overnight rain had been brought in by a westerly wind and had just painted the west side of all the trees wet. And I could have walked easily for sort of 5 miles just on that clue. And that clue is related to the moss, it's related to the lichens, it's related to 100 other clues. But that exact one I had never used as my primary means of navigation. So I just had a bit of fun with it, and it brought that childlike joy we're referring to back again. In terms of the first time it happened, I mean, there was that very first sort of strolling across the countryside, but actually there was a quite important moment for me, which happened at some point in my 20s, which I talk about a lot because I think it's, in terms of the philosophy of this art, it is important because if you show somebody how to find the North Star, which some people learn how to do when they're 8 years old and some people when they're 98 years old, and an awful lot of people never learn at all. But if you just show somebody how to use the plow, as we call it here, or the Big Dipper, as I think you refer to it there, and you find the North Star, and it's really not that complex. And most outdoors people, most people listening to your podcast are probably familiar with it. But the interesting thing happens. You know the theory that, okay, so the North Star is north. And then what a lot of people do, and I certainly did in my 20s or possibly a tiny bit before, is you get out a compass or these days a smartphone, and you say, let me check. And what you're really saying to yourself is, let me check the North Star works. But if you then do that enough times, there comes a moment quite quickly where you realize that actually the North Star is the reliable indicator. The thing in your hand works most of the time if you're lucky. And then there's this sort of penny drop moment where you go, well, wait a minute, if these two things disagree, it's the star that's working and the compass or the smartphone that's knackered. And at that moment, you realize that actually nature is more faithful. It is more true. And everything that we've invented over the past few thousand years, does something between a rubbish and a good job most of the time. But nature is true. It is the nature that is direction, and that is quite a sort of hard thing to get in a sort of loose sense in terms of conversation. But if you go out there and do the North Star exercise, or look at shadows in the middle of the day, you quite quickly get to this point. You go like, well, that is direction. That is true direction. If anything, whether it's electronic in paper form, if anything disagrees with that, then we've made a mistake in our tool. It's not nature that's wrong.
I love that. It's nature that's true, not this invention in your hand. That's important, and it is hard in this day and age, even for experienced outdoorsmen. If my navigation is telling me one thing, and I'm going to trust it most likely, even if it's wrong, just because I've been kind of relying on it for so long. So it's good to have these skills kind of in your back pocket if needed, or to totally build a journey from them. So for you've obviously got just a plethora of tools and skills kind of in your tool belt to use in pretty much any situation. How do you add a tool to that tool belt? How do you test a new idea, like you noticed with the west side of the trees getting wet? How do you test that until it's proven enough for you to basically add that in your skill set?
It's a good question, and I have a typical way of developing a new technique, which is observation. And over the years, I've learned that I'm looking for asymmetries, anomalies, things that are just standing out for some reason, and then the question why. So to give you an example, ivy has two stages of life. Now, I'd been trying to use ivy to navigate for many years, and it had been frustrating me because every time I thought, oh, okay, I can see, all right, so it's growing towards the light, and then the next minute I was growing away from the light. My next stage then is to, like so many people in all areas of research and learning, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Instead of me being, arrogant and thinking I know everything about ivy, I just quickly concede and I go, there's probably quite a few people out there who know more about ivy. So I'm looking for other, quite often in science journals, ecology journals, things like that. I'll take the thing that I've noticed and see if anybody has noticed it, more often than not in a completely different context. So I'll be standing, out in the edge of the woods going, oh, I think I've learned how to use ivy to find my way. And 48 hours later, I'm like sort of punching the air because there's some biological study that's been done into phototropism, the way plants grow towards or away from light. And I put those two things together and go, yes, my observations, and that takes me on another step. Quite often I do it just by using nature, and occasionally it's just by something I stumble across by reading. But normally it's that fusion of my observation, trying it out over a period of, sometimes a couple of days, sometimes a couple of years. I mean, there's one moon method I've been trying to nail for 9 years now and still haven't. But usually I guess that's what we've been doing as human beings, since dot. We go out there, we make a small discovery, we come back. 10,000 years ago, we sat around the fire and went, has anybody else noticed that? And 3 people go, yeah, you fool, we've been noticing that for years. Oh, yeah, great, so it works. That's kind of what I'm doing. Instead of the campfire, I'm in the age of the internet, I can look in all sorts of different places. And so quite often the science is there. It's just nobody's chosen to use it for navigation for several thousand years. So quite often I'm just, blowing the dust off something that would have been old news many years ago.
Wow, that's actually a really cool way to put it, blowing the dust off of it. Are there skills that you've maybe maybe a theory that you followed, like, I think this is telling me something, follow it down just a little bit and research it, and then it proves to be wrong or maybe unreliable?
Yes, I think there is. I mean, my understanding of the wind's behaviour grows each year, and that's one of the things I love about nature is that you can get to a practical, useful, fun level really quickly, like within a day. But you can't ever complete it if you see what I mean. So
Yes, it's a lifelong pursuit.
yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I encourage people with learning anything to do with nature is not to be daunted, because I was put off it in the early days. I think when any of us are if we're either in school or not that long out of college or something, the idea of having to learn names, things like this, it's a bit like, oh God, I think I've done that stage of my life. So my whole approach and the way I, write and teach about the subject is names aren't important. So noticing pattern, just noticing things is that's about 80% of it. Noticing things, then noticing patterns, and noticing trends. So an awful lot of people can go through their life without noticing that the prevailing wind will bend trees, plants, grasses over one way. And once you notice that, you'd be really, really hard pushed to spend 10 minutes outside without seeing a compass of some sort. And yet most people go their whole lives without noticing that. So that's the kind of quick in. But to actually master using the wind, I think would take about 200 lifetimes, because I'm still, with each book, I'm pushing my my skills and my sharing of it out there in terms of how. I mean, it was only about 4 or 5 years ago that I learned that wind is slowed more by partial cover than full cover. So I think most people imagine that a brick wall would stop the wind more than a bunch of trees. But part experience followed by a bit of research taught me that actually the wind is slowed more by a bush than by a brick wall. I mean, that in itself doesn't sound terribly practical or useful or even interesting necessarily, but it's just part of that, very, very long journey to get to know this character that we call the wind.
So it sounds like the wind's been one of your most challenging skills to learn.
Yeah, and it as I think I said, it sort of leaves footprints everywhere. So once you get to know it, it's announcing itself. I mean, if we look up where I am at the moment, I can see some high cumulus clouds sort of moving, and again, probably a small child could tell you that there's a relationship between the direction the clouds are moving and the direction of the wind you feel. But it's actually reasonably advanced natural navigation to know what that relationship is. It actually requires reasonably deep understanding of meteorology. But I generally try and avoid using words ending ology because it puts more people off. But the truth is you can learn all this stuff by observation. But the wind that moves the clouds touches the ground, gets slowed, and in meteorology terms, turns anti-clockwise. So just those words sound like, oh, that's taking the beauty out of it, isn't it? But it is part of that. I teach people you've got to use the clouds as one of your compasses and use the wind you feel as another compass, and you can keep them totally separate. But if you want to try and understand the relationship, then we're getting into more sort of intermediate, perhaps even advanced levels.
I mean, I love this stuff, and I spend as much time as I can outside, and usually on a trail that's pretty well marked, but not all the time. I've needed some orientation and navigation skills before, but for most people, I don't know what the stats are in the UK, but in the US, something like 60 to 65% of the population live in an urban area, which only makes up like 3% of the land mass, the land area of the US. Have you developed skills to help like someone navigate an urban setting?
Yes, and they're based on my broad philosophy, which is absolutely everything is a clue. So TV satellite dishes have trends everywhere in the world, and it only takes a couple of minutes. You just look up and you notice most TV satellite dishes are pointing one way.
Wow.
Yeah, it'll be broadly towards the equator, but then there's a cultural aspect to it. So if you walk across a big city, you're likely to move through different, cosmopolitan and ethnic differences, stuff like that. if you walk into Chinatown, you'll find that people have an interest in different channels, obviously, and therefore a different satellite. So you notice that this clue changes as you cross into Chinatown or any other area for that matter. But there's, as I say, absolutely everything is a clue. So there's still nature. The way mosses, algae, lichens grow in towns is still very useful. The tip there is look above ground level, because at ground level everything's commercial in a town. So people are paying people to clean and wash and scrub and everything because they want to sell something through that ground level thing. But if you look up 20 feet, you find quite often a surface that hasn't been touched for a couple of years, and you get a bit more nature there. But the animal that's easiest to find in towns is obviously the human being, and we are all individuals, as I think he says in Life of Brian, isn't it? But we also behave like a herd. So in simple terms, people go out of stations and transport hubs in the morning and into them late in the day. So if you're completely lost in a town or a city, you just watch what the herd are doing. You go against it in the morning or with it in the late afternoon, and you'll find a station or hub.
Do you find that more challenging personally, the urban setting?
I find it just as interesting, and it's challenging because it's not my sort of natural. I mean, I've spent a few years of my life living in London, but I'm not a natural city person, and so I find it forces my thinking into a different area, which is good for a bit, but it becomes more about sort of sociology in a way. So to give you an example, if you're completely lost in a city that's new to you, and you've decided you're going to ask somebody for help, all you've got to do is find a place where people are crossing the road, not following a regulated sort of traffic light type thing, but where people are making their own decision when to cross. And if you go towards the people who are taking the least time before stepping off the sidewalk, then you'll have a local. So regardless of what, we can look at what people are wearing and try and guess, is that a tourist? And sometimes that works, and that's all part of this game. But actually, research has shown that the people who pause at the edge of the sidewalk don't know the town as well as the people. I mean, it's all of this stuff is logical, but it's the noticing that's the real challenge.
So yeah, it seems very common sense based, intuitive even, but really just taking the time to notice it.
Yeah, and if like most people, there are a few things more excruciating than you finally decide to ask somebody, and then you get the 5-minute answer, which is a rambling version of I really don't know, but you could try this.
Man, I do a lot of bike trips, and I would always ask locals direction, like where do I go, how do I do this, and they were the most unreliable folks to ask, only because they felt this sort of pride in where they lived. And so if they didn't know the answer, because they don't look at it the same way that a cyclist would, they would just make something up. And it would often lead me in the wrong direction.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but it makes good sense. Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
If you look on bike touring or bike packing blogs, lots of people have experienced that because you notice every little change in elevation or every little curve in the road when you're on a bike, but not necessarily on a car, especially when you've lived there your whole life. It's really kind of counterintuitive phenomenon that happens everywhere. Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. If your dad is anything like mine, he is notoriously difficult to buy gifts for. And your father or father figures in your life might be the same. If you're struggling with what to gift your dad for Father's Day, give him the gift of a fun, powerful, and easy way to get outside and explore with his own electric e-bike. I have electric e-bike. It's the cargo version. It is awesome. I can honestly run to the store, get groceries, go get some parts, or, any house project, which I do a lot of. There's always that one little piece that I'm missing. And instead of getting in the truck, driving to the town, there's a small parking lot. It's hard to get in and out of. I can just zip over there in my e-bike. And it's also a heck of a lot more fun. And every trip is almost like this little adventure. Electric e-bikes offer a wide range of customizable and adjustable options as well. So if you know what your dad's into, whether it be cargo or taking kids or grandkids for a ride, all that's a possibility with what you can add to the bike. or even, an extra battery for a longer range. There's all sorts of stuff. So this year, skip the played out Father's Day gift. He doesn't need another mug or another tie or another, paperweight. Give the gift of adventure with electric e-bikes. Visit electricebikes.com, LECTRICE bikes.com. This episode is brought to us by Oris Watches. You know what piece of equipment on any adventure that I'm honestly surprised by how much I use is my watch. And I'm wearing a watch right now. I always have a watch on. And I believe that you should check out Oris Watches. Oris is a 119-year-old family-owned independent watch brand based out of Holstein, Switzerland. The brand has been certified climate and carbon neutral since 2021 and every year releases a sustainability report. Oris only makes mechanical watches like the new Pro Pilot X Caliber 400 and the new Pro Pilot Altimeter featuring a 3D printed carbon case. If you're a fan of mechanical watches like I am, there's nothing in the game that's better than Oris, and you can discover the full Oris collection at a retailer near you or at oris.ch. So if you want that one piece of equipment in your life to be functional, to be useful, to be beautiful, artistic, check out Oris Watches. Oris, go your own way. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
Yeah, I love the psychology of this sort of stuff, and it's reminded me of the slightly random example, which I call the lighthouse example, because I was first taught it many years ago when I was doing my professional sail training, which is it's a skipper's tip basically. If you're a skipper of a boat and the safety relies on finding a certain lighthouse at night. Now, the way you do it is you look at the chart, and the way lighthouses identify themselves is by the number of flashes and the timing. So, for example, it could be 3 flashes every 10 seconds. Now, it's a very simple thing, but if you're the skipper and you come up from the chart table and you shout to the person on the helm saying, "Have you seen a lighthouse?" They go, "Yeah, I've seen it." If you say to them, does it flash 3 times every 10 seconds? They'll go, "Yeah." Whereas if you say to them, what are its characteristics? How often is it flashing and when? They will then give you an honest answer. Now, not many people are going to be in that exact situation, but the philosophy and the psychology applies in all situations. If you hold up a map to somebody and say, that path goes that way, doesn't it? You'll get a yes. People don't like to upset people. Yeah, you get a yes. If you say, which way does it go? You get an entirely different, conversation.
That's hilarious. So if you are trying to extract clues, doing what you're doing, natural navigation from a local or from a person, you have to be very careful about how you ask the question to not have, a confirmation bias or just lead you down the wrong path.
Yeah, and you beat me to it. Confirmation bias is one of the biggest pitfalls in natural navigation because, again, I love the psychology. There's a stage in aviation called I think it's nicknamed the killing zone, and it's not as you might imagine when people are really inexperienced. It's when people, I think it's sort of between roughly 100 and 200 hours of flying experience, because when you've just got your license at about 50 something hours, you're super careful, just like when you've got your driving license. You're like, okay, I know I am a menace. I know everybody is in danger around me. I'm going to be just so on my game. You then get exhausted from that approach, and at a certain stage in everything, you take your eye off the ball, sometimes literally, and it's the same in natural navigation. You start thinking, this has got to be impossible. I mean, there's a reason why compasses and GPS and all these other things were invented. Surely this is impossible. And then you find yourself succeeding, and at that point, you start. I mean, my boys are 15 and 12 almost, and they're at this stage now where I took them out at the end of the last holidays, and I said, right, okay, let's get some air. I'm dropping you at this car park. There's a car park a couple of kilometers from north of here, I think it was. Off we go. And they very, very confidently get it right, and they very, very confidently get it wrong. And I've been on that journey, and they're seeing the clues, they're identifying it right, they're using the right technique. But then there comes a point where you go, okay, well, I sort of feel like I should be going this way, and the clues backing me up, instead of what you have to do, which is say, honestly, what is this clue telling me? Even if it disagrees with what my gut is telling me. And there are parallels with aviation there as well. One of the key things with aviation, with flying in cloud, is you have to trust the instruments, because your inner ear will tell your brain that you're rolling to the left or you're going into a dive, and your instinct will be to fight that with the controls. But the instruments are saying you're flying level, don't do anything. It's the same outdoors with natural navigation. You get a feeling, which can be prompted by all sorts of different things, and is slightly different in all of us, that you want to go a certain way. And at that point, it's very easy for the nature to say, yeah, you're right, you keep going that way. But actually, you have to do it the other way around. You have to say, I don't have a feeling. I want to look at the nature objectively. What is this lichen telling me? What is the fact that these three, flowers all pointing the same way? What is that actually saying? And quite often that'll be a 20, 30 degree difference, which over a couple of miles is quite a lot.
I'm sure you get asked this a lot. I know you do. And I can already hear listeners grumbling. Why in the world would anyone need this skill set?
Oh, it's a question I don't tire of, because it's a good one, and the answer is the practical need is close to nil. There's a more than 99% chance that none of us will need this in a survival sense. So I don't even approach it from that. I approach it because this is very much why I've pursued the art of natural navigation, is that it enriches our journeys. We learn a lot, which is satisfying for lots of people, but we experience a huge amount, which is why choose to be outdoors these days unless it's about the experience? We can as you were saying in your statistics about town living, we can get through most of our day with only a few seconds of outdoors. So most of the time we're choosing to be outdoors because of the experience, and natural navigation, I honestly believe, doubles, trebles, quadruples the intensity of that experience. 1 mile using natural navigation is genuinely, the same as a full day, being led. I mean, to give you an urban example of it, I think everybody's had that experience where you're having to drive somewhere in a town you haven't been before. And because you're having to drive, whether you do it through digital means or other means or whatever, you build a relationship with that bit of the town. Okay, so I'm going to have to cross the river. I'm going to have to, okay. So you start a very basic relationship with the town. If you're a passenger in the same car, and this has happened to me loads, I'm no different from anybody else. It's quite normal for my wife to drive me somewhere in a town, and then she'll drink a couple of glasses of wine and say, right, they're the keys. And I'll go, I really have no idea. I really don't know where we are, because I've switched off. And it's the same outdoors. We are all switching off, and natural navigation is a fun way of just saying that ain't going to wash. You are going to have to pay attention. You are going to have to understand what's going on around you. Through that comes a relationship, and it's like everything outdoors. There's a bit of effort at the beginning, and then a huge amount of payback.
Wow. So it sounds like it draws this new level of excitement and new level really of adventure in everyday life.
Yes. And I coming back to something I was talking about earlier, the tribes, I try not to pontificate. I'm not trying to say one thing is ever better than another, because, each to their own. And I think there are people out there. I mean, I come across people who are really into orienteering, who have absolutely no interest in natural navigation. And initially it confused me. I was like, oh, surely, being able to sense direction using, 19 different ways to turn a tree into a compass, surely that's got to be of some interest to you. But I was wrong. They basically wanted to run outdoors and use their mind a tiny bit. Other people want to use their mind a lot and their body a lot. Some people, a lot of people into natural navigation don't do journeys of more than a couple of 100 meters, a couple of 100 yards. It's about making a map. It's about understanding that the fact that bird on the tree is now facing a different direction tallies with my sensing the wind has changed, which tallies with the fact that I can now see a ring around the sun altogether, which means it's going to rain in 4 hours. It's all part of this really rich picture, and you don't actually have to go on an expedition of any sort to do that. So for me, it's all personal choice. You want to go half a mile, or you want to go 1,000 miles. One's not better or worse than the other. It's a personal choice. But if you want a deeper experience, if you're interested, I sometimes call this subject bushcraft for the mind. If that appeals to you, then natural navigation is it's a fun world.
So how can people get in touch with you, and how can they learn more about natural navigation?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I've got a website which I've been building over more than a decade now called naturalnavigator.com. And you can explore that. I've deliberately set it up so that you can kind of explore it. You can go in looking at star examples, looking at animal examples, looking at weather examples. There are details of all my books on there. I do give talks and I run courses. In truth, I'm very lucky that there are people all around the world who have an interest in this, and I can't always get to the area somebody's in. But I have a newsletter where I send out information about when I am giving talks and things like that, and it's easy to subscribe through the website. But I'd say have a little explore of the website. If this sounds like your sort of thing, then I've written half a dozen books on the subject, and they all have a slightly different approach and niche. Again, appealing to different aspects of the subject and in turn to the different tribes out there. So hopefully there'll be one for you.
Man, well, I'm excited to learn more about this because I admittedly don't know a lot about natural navigation, yet I claim to be an outdoor enthusiast. So these types of things will really just draw out interesting perspectives, no matter if it's a walk around the block with my dogs or if it's a hike up in the mountains. This could definitely add a lot of excitement just to the little interactions with the outdoors every day.
Great. Yeah, go for it. And that question I mentioned before, which way am I looking? If you just ask yourself that question, just stare into the distance, even if the distance is only a few yards from you, and just ask yourself, which way am I looking? And there's a very good chance there are several dozen clues to the answer to that question, within your senses.
That's awesome. So yeah, all right, every listener, you go outside today. If you might be very familiar with your area, but try to spin around a couple times, then open your eyes and say, which direction am I looking? That'll be a good test.
Go for it.
All right. Well, Tristan, yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, man.
Thanks a lot for having me, Mason. Happy navigating.
All right, you as well.
Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to growing the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.